Askin. I'll be the moderator for today's session. I'm here with Showpad and Visually, and this is how to create and manage show-stopping effective sales collateral. Again, if you have any questions, please type them into your chat box, and we'll answer them at the end of Q&A. With that, let's get started. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Dena Nejad. She's a product marketer here at Showpad. Dena, care to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
And Kathleen Smith, Director of Marketing here at Visually.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Okay, great. So before we get into today's content, I'd like to prompt you guys with a little bit of a plug for Showpad, obligatory. We were founded in 2011. We're named the fastest growing tech startup in Europe by TNW. We have 750 plus customers, and we have offices based in San Francisco, London, and Ghent. We are a sales enablement platform for marketers and salespeople to distribute and view analytics around content. And with that, I'd like to kick the presentation to Kathleen from Visually, and she'll walk you guys through some of the awesome content we have for today. Kathleen?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Let me show my screen here and get all set up. Just a little bit about Visually for our obligatory plug here. Visually is a premium creative services platform for brands. We work with B2C brands, all types of different industries, and we serve all different types of content. So we have about 1,000 of the world's top freelance creatives, animators, designers, developers, writers. And we set them up with brands in our project center to collaborate on all different types of content, namely infographics and presentations, ebooks, video, social media content, which is perfect because today we're going to be talking about sales enablement content. So we'll dive right in here. Today we're going to be walking through the 5 different secrets to creating show-stopping effective sales content. And for the first 3, since we specialize in content creation, we're going to be talking about how to make your content actionable, engaging, and recyclable. And then we're going to hand off to Dena with Showpad, and she's going to be talking about how to make sure that your content is both findable and trackable. So we'll dive right in here. A few different stats about how to make your content engaging. The first one being that 89% of buyers prefer short form content. This makes a lot of sense since people are busier than ever before and lower on time. So, we need to just jump right into the sales process and be able to deliver the information that our buyers need in a reasonable time frame. So think shorter presentations, shorter video, short case studies. Snackable, easily digestible content is really popular. A lot of people think of small, short form content for social media, but we're also seeing it become increasingly popular during the sales enablement phase with sales teams as well. This leads right into the next stat, that 85% of respondents said that they wanted their content to be mobile optimized. So not necessarily a mobile app, but something that's easy to consume on a mobile device. So you can think about, tying right in with the short form content, content that has, easy to read type, images that are easy to consume on mobile, shorter form, and friendly to a mobile device. So formats that can be consumed on mobile really easily, PDF, static images, video, all great formats for mobile. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up too is that 20% of sales opportunities are coming from personalized content. So this was a big theme this year. I don't know if anybody was able to attend Marketo's Summit, but the big theme that everybody was talking about was content personalization. So not just in the content marketing arena, but also in product marketing, how important it is to be able to tailor your content to your different personas, and making sure that your your demographic with this increasingly shorter time frame and time constraints get the type of content that they are going to find relevant to them. So kind of this overall theme for engaging content is just making sure that you're thinking about your audience really closely and what's going to be engaging to them. So what is it that they're going to, find the most beneficial in the time frame that they have. And the next thing I want to talk about is actionable content. And I just moved here to San Francisco about a year and a half ago from Orlando. And Orlando is like the marketer's dream zone because we have Disney in our backyard there. And with Disney, everything is like this experiential marketing just experiment where you can kind of see how Disney approaches content, and it's a really interesting way to think about how we can bring that into content marketing and sales content. So one thing that I always like to think about with content is you have this great experience at Disney, you go on Pirates of the Caribbean, you go on your favorite ride, you're having a great time, and what's the very first thing that happens as soon as that's over is that you exit through the gift shop. So you should have this kind of similar mindset when you're creating sales content. You want to make sure that your content is engaging and relevant and informational and useful to your demographic, but you also want to make sure that you do have a strong call to action at the end, and that you're able to connect that valuable experience with the actual call to action. So we're just going to kind of go through a few examples from Visually's clients here. SoFi is a financial company, and I really like what they've done with their sales collateral here. Not only is it a really nice design, really clean, but the call to action is very personal. So it's an interactive link that pops up an email dialogue going straight to Jennifer Smith here. And it's, I really like that she's included her picture here. This is something that you can definitely think about doing with your sales team, is personalizing the call to action with your sales team's headshots. It really helps, garner that face-to-face kind of relationship through the collateral. So that's a really nice tip for the call to action. And then also thinking about, how you can use data visualization. So data is really a great way to sell and a really great way to get your message across. But if it's really complex and your audience isn't going to be able to digest and comprehend it quickly, it's not going to mean a lot to them, and it might actually scare them off. So Red Bull did a really interesting sell sheet here where they were trying to convince vendors to include Red Bull in their cold boxes. And so they're showing a can of Red Bull here with just some different data viz stats. And it shows that Red Bull is consumed, almost half of people will consume it almost immediately. So using really engaging visuals to kind of spice up some drier stats is a really great way to do this. And it also makes it easy for your audience to quickly grasp and understand what the data is and the story that you're trying to tell. And then lastly, looking here at QMedic, another sell sheet here. And I really like these three examples because they just prove that a sell sheet doesn't have to be a really boring, dry piece of collateral. And this one in particular does a really nice job of being proactive with messaging. So if you're looking at this, it's a wearable for older people to make sure that they're connected and able to check in with their families and monitored. And so there's a lot of reasons why you might automatically think that you wouldn't want to have your grandfather or somebody wearing this wearable, and they immediately address those in the messaging so that they're removing any barriers to you taking action proactively here. So I think it's really helpful to think about what the barriers to entry could be for somebody to test out your product, or to at least engage with your call to action, whether it's a sales call or setting an appointment or something like that, and to proactively address that in your collateral. And then lastly, we're going to talk here about recyclable content. So there's a really great stat from the Content Marketing Institute that says that 54% of marketers are saying that it's really hard to produce enough engaging content. And I think that one of the things that we as marketers need to be thinking about is not just how do we produce enough content, but how do we get enough mileage out of the content that we're producing. And one way to do this is to really think about how we can make our content recyclable through repurposing. So 2 quick tricks here. One trick for making your content recyclable and repurposing it is to take your main piece of content, whether it's a video or a presentation or an ebook, and adding a prefix and a suffix to that content. So wrapping it in some smaller content, like if you're doing a video, adding a sizzler on the front and a bumper on the end that are personalized to your personas or have a different call to action. And then all of a sudden you have a second piece of content, and you could do that 3 or 4 or 5 times and have 3, 4, 5 different videos that you could use for different situations. So that's the sandwich approach. And then the second approach is the derivative approach. So taking one main piece of content, whether it be a video or a sell sheet or a lookbook or something like that, and slightly altering it so that you can create new versions. So again, this is really helpful going back to how do you make content engaging through personalization, is to create a slightly different version that you are maintaining, 80 to 90% of the original content, but just slightly altering it so that it feels really personalized and targeted to specific demographics that you're targeting. And that was it for sorry about that. Yeah. And then, so we'll hand it over to Dena then to talk about findable and trackable.
Great, thank you, Kathleen.
Yep.
That was great.
Thanks, Kathleen. So now we're going to address the other side of content. So Kathleen just went through some amazing pointers in terms of how to make your content actionable, engaging, how do you make sure that it's reusable and you're using it to its most effectiveness, and resources are scarce, so you want to make sure that everything that you make is being utilized to its highest impact. So a lot of the material that Kathleen talked about will work with your sales team, and it enables your sales team to really drive conversations with prospects and help them close those deals faster. But what we're finding out is that marketing spends several amounts of their budget, actually up to 25% of their budget, creating this amazing pieces of content and hoping that it will help grow sales. But then we're finding out from the sales team that up to 70% of that content is actually never used by them. And it's really interesting to think that and to think what happens, what happens during this process, and marketing does their best to create things that helps close deals, but then sales is never utilizing them. If you talk to the sales team, it's not that they don't want to use it. It's not that they want to live in their own world and just do their own thing. They like the help. They want marketing to support them. They actually spend, up to 30 hours a month looking for the right content and having to spend time to actually create it on their own, because whether they can't find it, they don't know where it exists, they don't know what it's relevant to, or when they do find it, they realize that, it's not relevant to the conversation that they're trying to have. It's not relevant to the buyer's journey or the persona they're trying to address. And this has become a huge misalignment between marketing and sales. It's something that exists in a lot of organizations, and we keep hearing it over and over and over again as to both these parties have great intentions. They both want to grow bottom line and they want to grow business, but for some reason the communication lacks, and they're kind of living in their own world. Some of the other things that are an issue when you think about content and how sales utilize it is that another communication gap, and that's really when sales finally does find the right content and finally does get in front of a prospect with what they think is useful, and they do their pitch, or they try to get them to be engaged as much as possible, and then they leave the meeting, and then they have no visibility into what that prospect thought about that piece of content. Was that piece of content actually engaging for them? Were they actually interested? They spent a lot of time after the meeting trying to answer the questions and trying to follow up and call them over and over and over again to try to gauge where their interest level lies, and whether they actually liked what they saw. So how does this affect the sales cycle, and how does it look like today? So as I said, and as Kathleen mentioned, marketing creates all this collateral to try to nurture this possible prospect through the sales funnel. And today, a lot of companies have visibility into how content is being interacted with at the very beginning of the sales funnel. There's marketing automation systems like Marketo or HubSpot, or there are email tools like Yesware or ToutApp or CRMs that show you whether content has been looked at or open at the very beginning of the sales cycle when you're dealing with a lead. But then once marketing spends all this time in qualifying these leads and turning them to true prospects and hands them off to the sales team, then they lose all visibility. They don't know what happens with those leads. They don't know what these prospects are thinking. And as I mentioned, they don't really know what happens to their content. And it becomes quite frustrating because you work really hard at the beginning stages of the funnel and you're hoping that things will prosper and turn into great opportunities, but you have absolutely no view into it. So how would we want this to work? What would be the ideal situation? And we've talked to many of our customers and have heard these pain points, and what they want is a solution where content becomes the center of everything. There is a central place where content lives, and via that content, they can enable their sales situations, whether it's their direct sales teams or whether it's being used to train the sales team or onboard them, or they're dealing with resellers or partners that may need it even more than anybody else because they're selling, several different product lines, and you want them to be informed and have the knowledge of what your product is about. Or they can utilize it in trade shows and when people are, coming up to you and asking you about your product. So customers want this content to be centralized, and they want to give access to these different type of selling situations of that content in a seamless way. They want them to have access whether they're in the middle of a farm or if they're in an operating room, or if they're in a office, a corporate office. They want them to be able to get it right when they need it, anywhere they are, regardless of the selling situation. And they want this content to be trackable. They want to be able to follow it through the entire sales cycle and be able to, like Kathleen said, find out whether something they've created is actually useful and impactful. And if it's not, they can reprioritize and shift focus onto creating things that make sense and that are useful. They want to be able to see not only how sales interacts with these type of collaterals, but also how prospects are interacting with it, and ultimately be able to optimize the entire sales process by creating better content and more impactful sales-driven collateral. And this is really where what we call sales enablement comes into place, and a solution like Showpad would come into place. So Showpad is capable of taking your content, putting it in a central space, giving access to it, regardless of what platform your sales team is on, whether it's on their desktop or their laptop or iPads or Windows devices or any sort of tablet or their mobile phone. And the team has access to it regardless of their selling situation. There's places where people don't have access to the internet or they have connectivity issues. And we've kind of tried to remove all those barriers so that you can see what the impacts are with having the right collateral at the right time at the right place. And by doing that, we've created this loop of communication now and this feedback that once marketing creates something, sales can access it. And then there's literally analytical feedback and personal feedback on whether something is working or not. Showpad, we do this internally for our own sales team, and we're constantly in communication of whether something is working or not. If it's not, how can we make it better to make sure that we're allocating resources appropriately and we're optimizing on whatever we're trying to do. So by closing this gap in being able to create better content, you're really helping businesses transform, and you're helping them grow by giving them control, by allowing them to create effective content, as we've been talking about during this presentation. And you ultimately allow them to optimize spend and be able to get the most out of that 25% that they're allocating on content creation, and making sure that either making more impactful content or realizing that, maybe not everything you make makes sense, and maybe being able to reduce the creation and really make things that make sense. As you can see, here's some examples of some of the customers that we have that have worked with Showpad and are working with Showpad, and they're great customers, and it's really interesting to see how they've transformed their businesses. We have customers that, because they've gained visibility, they've re-strategized their entire content creation. They've gone from getting rid of collateral that's not utilized and not preferred to creating things that are more engaging, more exciting, more visual, to make sure that the salespeople actually want to use it. So bringing these two pieces together, here we've talked about what is effective content. It's way beyond just something that has a great look and feel, right? As Kathleen talked about, it needs to be actionable, it needs to be engaging, it needs to be reutilized in different formats for different users and personalized, and then it needs to be made sure that it's findable and trackable. If people can't find it, if they can't track it, they really don't know if it's working or not. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back to Lenny. I hope you guys have enjoyed what you've heard so far.
Awesome. Thank you, Dena. That was great. I appreciate the overview of sales effective content and creating great collateral that's both engaging and actionable, as well as recyclable, and finally findable and trackable. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions. If any folks have any particular questions about today's content or would like to see some examples, we'd be happy to share some more with you during the rest of today's call. We have about 5 more minutes to wrap up. And with that, I'd actually like to get to a couple that were asked during the presentation. So first, and I'll leave kind of this open to both Kathleen and Dena, whoever wants to snag this one. It's what's some examples of effective sales collateral that you've seen used for your organization? So maybe for visually.
Yeah, so our team, we kind of have a unique use case because we're so visual, that our team really likes to show and not tell. So, really showing like portfolio examples of some of the work that we've done, which happen to be infographics and presentations and ebooks. But being able to package those client examples in a way that is engaging and, actionable and those other points for our audience means that we try to keep the examples really personalized to our personas, and we try to do it in a way that is short form and mobile. So showing PDFs of different examples, whether that's in a presentation format or an ebook format, and just keeping them really short form, keeping things like, really compact, to help people kind of get to what they're interested in really quickly. We haven't used a lot of sales collateral for our own purposes, because of the fact that, our clients are really interested in seeing examples. So I guess, one tip would be to really think about what it is that your clients and your prospects want to see. And it may be sales collateral, or it may be more of a lookbook of examples of some of the work that you've done. I think it's really relevant to whatever it is your business is, to show whatever it is that the client is going to get out of the relationship with your brand, and be able to show that in a really concise way.
Okay, great. So essentially brevity and quality of content is really essential to providing that.
Yeah, I think it's less about the formats and more about, really targeting and honing in on what it is that your audience is looking for.
Okay, great. So Dena, what have you seen at Showpad with around successful content use? Is there particular content types, or do you sort of see what Kathleen has seen it visually?
Yeah, I agree with Kathleen. I think when it comes to sales enablement in particular, though, I found it that, like you said, things that are short to the point, and people can just open it and glance at it and know what they're trying to get out of it works best. We've actually experienced that video works really, really well. People it gives them a visual and an audio, so they're not second guessing what we're trying to tell them. We're actually explaining it, and we've definitely seen our videos being utilized a lot. I definitely agree. I think some of the material that we've created that are a little bit longer, I think we do that for maybe lead gen purpose and making sure that our audience is getting everything they want. But when it comes to sales, we tend to go back and create brief versions of them, even if it's sales communicating it to a prospect. I think they prefer the brief version, and if a customer asks, well, can I see all of it, then we can send it out to them. And then the other thing that works really well, and this is really just tying it a little bit back to the findable part of it. I've noticed that if I'm creating channels within Showpad, and if it's a common term that resonates with people, and if they know exactly what will be available when they go into that particular channel, things get utilized a lot more. If I create several different paths to get to something, or if I'm not using a very common term, you see those channels just sitting and no one really opening it to see what's in it. So I think the collateral itself, and also the way you make it available to people, is very key to see how things are getting utilized, and making sure things are getting utilized.
Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate that summary. I think that's really nice. I think for me personally, as a demand marketer, I see a lot of what Dena mentioned on the side of video really helping with conversion rates, click-through rates, with a lot of our emails, for instance, and definitely with our landing pages. So any landing page that has, say, a video associated with it, or has one included, converts typically at almost 2 times the rate. And we've also seen some similar effects around infographics with our blogs. For instance, our blog content gets down to actually generate leads using some of the more engaging visual content that we have created. So a couple more questions that came in from the audience around the presentation itself. For those folks who'd like a copy of the presentation, again, we'll be sending out that copy within the next couple of business days. As long as you attended, you'll get a copy. So no worries there. Specifically around actionable content, there was a question that came in around the content itself. So does actionable itself mean entertainment value? So is content a form of entertainment? I'll throw that question to Kathleen.
Yeah, I think that it really depends on what it is that your audience is looking for. So actionable means different things to different audiences, and really what is going to make them take action and convert. And, for the purposes of sales collateral, I think the framework there is that we're thinking like what's going to actually close the deal. So, I hate to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it all goes back to personalizing to the personas. So you may have 3 or 4 different personas, and for one persona, what's actionable may not be actionable to another persona, even if the messaging is still the same. So yeah, I mean, I think it just really depends on, which audience you're talking about, for, what actionable really means to them.
So it's really understanding the core of your business objectives and being able to act on those things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So a couple more questions around specifically visually and how you guys make content more actionable. Are there particular tactics that you guys have used in your sales collateral that you've seen work? Let's say maybe it's specific types of calls to action.
Yeah, so, again, for us, like how we're using Collateral is namely like client examples. So one way to do that is to frame client examples in a way that you're showing the examples and you're also including a call to action, whether that's to schedule an appointment if it's further up, towards the top of the funnel, or it's during the sales process, to kind of wrap those things with, a CTA that leads somebody on to the next step, whatever that is. So if they're already in the sales process and talking to a salesperson, it's nice to, like, I really like that example of the collateral with the sales rep's name and her headshot and her email address. I mean, that could be a call to action that's a little less obvious. But that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to, if it's a very traditional sell sheet type of collateral, to have something at the bottom that, leads them on to, what is the next step. If it's, schedule a product tour or, schedule a content consultation, something like that. So to kind of always be setting the next step in the cadence is a really good way to build in actionability to content.
Or maybe availability. So for instance, as an example for folks that are asking for a little bit more concrete examples, I can give you an example with our landing pages. For instance, one thing that we do is we make our free trial buttons, or buttons that are specific to action items that you can take, available at all times. So no matter what part of the landing page you're on, or let's say no matter what part of the website you're on, you can actually start your primary action. And I think that's especially useful for folks that come back, return visitors, as opposed to necessarily new visitors, because you're not looking to close leads immediately right up front. You're sometimes looking to just communicate a message or make sure that they understand what you do or how you do it. And then later on, maybe that they come back and they say, oh, great, I'm ready now, right? Like I want to engage. So some questions around the inclusion of video in materials and how best to present that video. Maybe, Dena, you could speak to how you might be able to present video in Collateral.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to creating videos for sales enablement, I think one of the biggest important thing is to making sure that piece of content, or in this case, the video, is kind of available and works on any sort of system. I think marketing needs to keep in mind that sales reps out in the field or with their prospects may not be able to have access to their laptops or whatever it is. So we have to make sure that everything transfers really nicely into mobile devices, tablets, smartphones, their laptop, their desktop, and keeping that in mind and making sure that it's easy to present that and it doesn't lose its quality and its functionality if it goes from one platform to another. That's really important. Making sure that a little bit of further back in the funnel, if you're talking and still nurturing prospects, if you're embedding a video into an email, or if you're embedding it into your marketing automation system like HubSpot or Marketo, making sure that it tests out, making sure those platforms are not going to break links when it goes into several different inboxes. People utilize Gmail, Outlook, I don't even know if Hotmail or Yahoo or all those
People
old
still use that stuff.
but the chances are they do, and if they do, you better make sure that it works for them. And I understand like some platforms are just really outdated and you can eliminate those and not worry about them, but there's still quite a bit of variance of platforms that are being utilized today, and if each company and each enterprise has their own, and making sure that you optimize whatever you're creating for everything that's out there, or at least most of the things that are out there.
Yeah, and one thing to think about too with video is, a lot of more corporate environments block something like YouTube. Mm-hmm. So, if you're going to present it as part of the sales process, that you're thinking about, where can you host it so that your prospects can actually get to it and see it.
Yeah, I found that especially the case. I used to work in finance and or the financial sector, and every single company out there in the financial sector blocks content delivery, especially via video. Mm-hmm. So finding places like maybe Wistia or Vidyard, other alternative hosting platforms that allow you to display content in a more controlled environment without user interaction helps. Mm-hmm. So getting into a few other questions around creating great interactive content. What's your opinion or experience with creating collateral that is more interactive, i.e. maybe PDFs with clickable buttons or links? And actually, I think this might speak to some of the more interesting use cases that Showpad has seen around HTML5. So maybe, Dena, you can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really important to have your content be interactive. We've definitely have seen really large enterprises with a massive product lines really taking this on and making sure their content is interactive. And we've seen them take the content and organize it via, instead of folders or instead of channels, via HTML5 files, and create really, a decision matrix via HTML5 that guides prospects or the sales team through a conversation that they should be having, and really helps them navigate and find the right collateral to show their prospects. And I say prospects because we've actually seen companies that Showpad works with, like Accuvant or some of our insurance companies that have different personas, use this HTML5 capability, and their sales rep go out to the field and are trying to navigate the conversation via it, and prospects take their tablets and start navigating their own conversation and start playing around with the content itself. And at that point, you really know that you have the content in the right hand of the right person, right? And making sure they're finding what they need based on their thought process and the questions they have during the buying cycle. And that's been really interesting in terms of engaging and making sure. Again, I think the other part of it is, PDFs are great when you're sharing via email and you just need to get a certain type of information to a prospect. But if you're presenting in person or from an inside sales team perspective, if you're presenting and sharing a screen, is not the most engaging. You lose people's attention really quickly. So you got to make sure that, whatever you're presenting, back to Visually's point, it's very visual and very graphic and very, you don't have too much text on this screen, and you can lead the conversation and keep the person's attention by providing them, with engaging material to keep the conversation afloat.
Okay, great. So I think the HTML5 example is a really cool one, and we really have seen some amazing implementations of that, and specifically for organizations that have a lot of different products. And I think that that's the main use case when you really have a lot of different things that you want to be talking about, but you don't know what the right one is amongst those things. So you can help, it can help your organization go down to the 2 or 3 key things that you want to talk to a prospect about along their buyer journey, if you will. So a different sort of question, and I imagine this has more to do with website or visual content that's online. What kinds of call to action are best to get viewers to sign up for ongoing information feeds specifically? So we can probably speak to a little bit of that, but maybe Kathleen, do you want to start off there?
Yeah, so I think it's important with a call to action for somebody to receiving ongoing communication. I really like when people say that you can opt out at any time. We don't spam you. I think there's this hesitation to committing to like this ongoing cadence that people are more hesitant to. So any assurance that you can give, like I just really like it when I see like, the little asterisk that says like, we're not going to spam you, we don't sell our list, anything like that. You can, opt out at any time. That gives me the reassurance that, if I'm going to opt into, getting your newsletter blasts or, whatever kind of drip, that I can back out at any time, and I'm going to be much more likely to do that. So that's one like really concrete tip is, assure your audience that they're not signing away their life in blood to receive all of your communications ongoing. And then I think any of the best practices, and Lenny, you can probably speak to this much more, with conversion optimization for, calls to action, the word get performs really well.
Yep.
Stuff like that. I think you can kind of tailor that to, the purpose of getting somebody to opt into your newsletter or whatever type of ongoing communication, and marry some of those best practices with, subscription to something like that.
Yeah, I've seen things like sign up or try something work a little bit better. I think when you're really aggressive with someone or, a general high level prospects, it tends to work worse. So for instance, like trial it now doesn't tend to perform, or, even sign up isn't as good as, for instance, try, or things like take a test drive or something like that. Those are really powerful words or alternatives that you can try. And I think the real core to this process is test your CTAs, right? Like please do that that's like the number one way to determine whether or not because you don't even necessarily know whether or not one type of call to action works for a particular audience that you're going after. Sometimes it can be different if you're talking to stay-at-home moms versus let's say a field prospect like a lot of our customers have in a manufacturing floor or in a doctor's office or whatever. Those people respond differently to different messages. So moving on to one of our last two questions for today. And again, if you do have any additional questions, we will absolutely answer them offline, and I'll tell you how to do that in a bit. But one of our last couple is, what's more important, great content or good content with high interactivity? What do you guys think? It's a little bit of a tough question.
Yeah, that is a tough one. It is a tough one, and it really depends, I think, how you define great content, right? I think if you define it the way we defined it today, then interactivity should be a part of it. But I'm assuming you mean if you have, a piece of collateral that has all the right information and good resources and sources like that, and maybe is not as interactive. And I would then say good content with interactivity is more important. I think you can have everything in the world in a PDF file that's 20 pages long. If no one is going to read it and no one is going to find out about it, it is not impactful. What do you think, Kathleen?
Yeah, I think it also depends on, what is it that you're hoping to get out of this piece of content? Like, what is, the ideal conversion? Maybe interactivity isn't important, for that purpose. I mean, it's hard for me to think of a situation where you wouldn't want to incorporate interactivity if you could, because a lot of times it's, pretty easy to add links to a PDF, something like that. But if I really had to pick, I would probably say great content, just based around the context that great content should equal something that moves your audience to whatever action it is that you set as the goal for that piece of content. So
even if you don't necessarily get an interaction, but as long as they're ultimately ending up doing the action that you want, then that's fantastic.
Yeah, because
right?
If that's engagement and
right.
they're, engaged with your content, then, if interactivity isn't embedded in that piece of content, then they're going to take action regardless.
So in the digital world, I think the way that I think about this as a demand marketer is assisted conversions. So for me, it's really important that the content that we create actually helps along the buyer process, and people are reading it, looking at it, and then if they convert later on, we don't necessarily know what that moment of zen was, that like, oh, aha moment, right? That doesn't always, it's not always clear, but at the very least with Showpad, for instance, you can see when that prospect is engaging with that piece of content, and you know exactly when that person touches the pricing page, for instance, or maybe the contract gets opened up. That level of visibility is really useful for us, at least, and we find that when you take a sales enablement tool and you take it to your team and you see the results, you'll understand the difference that it creates for you. So with that, I'd like to give you guys a quick overview of how you can reach us to learn more. First, you can go to www.showpad.com/resources to learn more and engage with some of our content. Please do. And then, of course, with Visually, go to hub.visual.ly, and you'll be able to find a lot of great content there. And finally, to speak with sales, if you guys have any questions, you can email us at sales@showpad.com or sales@visually.com or visual.ly, my bad. And of course, the numbers you see there. Thanks very much again for your time. Kathleen and Dena, thank you for the great presentation. That was a really nice walkthrough. We appreciate it very much. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.